Share. Perfect. So hello and welcome to the Battalion Barbell free 16-week program. JJ and I have gotten together. And if you're watching this near April time, 2021, JJ, welcome to the team, bro. So JJ and I came together. JJ had a fantastically successful isometric based program previously, kind of around 2020, start of this global pandemic, if you're watching around about that time. We wanted to get together and write something for free to kind of give back to the community. And also, you know, some people have been hit really, really hard financially across the coronavirus times. And we kind of wanted to make sure that if people wanted a training program from, you know, some experts in the industry, that they'd have that to go to look through and to kind of give some guidance to the program. So the basis behind this whole thing is to guide a lifter back into the gym across the first 4 weeks, presuming that maybe they've had a layoff, maybe they haven't had access to a gym for a little while. And this program can very much be evergreen. You know, you can use it kind of whenever, really. So if you're somebody a bit like myself, who after a buildup of more intense training needs an easier training block to kind of stay in the game and to feel good, you can also do it and run it like that. So this is basically designed for a 4-week introduction block, which we'll run through in a second. And then to stack on top of that 3 other blocks that you kind of have a fork in the road after your strength block, or the block 2 that you're seeing here, to then go into 3A and 3B. So JJ, if you want to run people through kind of the goals and intention of the intro block, the kind of the first weeks 1 to 4, and then just kind of talk them through what the goals are there and why it might be beneficial for them to do that.
All right, cool. So what we're going to do with this block is basically, as Alex has mentioned, we're just trying to use this block to, you know, especially for people that have taken a long time off, to try to bring you back up to speed as quickly as possible, right? So in order to do that, what we're going to focus on with this block is actually a lot of specific exercises as well as specific loading. So what do we mean when we say specific exercises? We're talking about the competition lifts. We're gonna have you practice the lift as often as possible, whilst trying to you know, kind of manage your fatigue levels by using you know, very specific variations such as tempos and long pauses and things like that, right? And in terms of specific loading, what we're actually referring to is we're referring to sort of like peak intensities that are, you know, as close as possible that we can get you to, without, you know, piling loads of soreness and fatigue and all the sort of the negatives of training. So that's what we're trying to achieve in the first block. And what we're going to do, the protocol that we're using is just, we're going to use a single at 6 protocol, and you will see how the program gets kind of built up. We will kind of walk you through it, but we're using a single at 6 protocol, which should put you around, you know, about 86%, 85%, which is, you know, significantly high enough intensity for you to feel like, okay, this is actually slightly challenging for me, but it's not going to kill me for in my build up to try to regain strength, right? So we're also going to use a, you know, a minimum effective kind of dose setting to try and bring you back up to speed in terms of what you can handle, right? So we're looking at really low volumes, just enough so that you can get enough practice. And if you run the program right in the first block, you should be able to see that, you know, your single at 6s do take quite a little bit of a jump, but as long as you're staying within the RPE, we should be able to mitigate any of these sort of downsides towards, you know, suddenly coming back to training. All right, so in the second block, what we're gonna do from there is then take you, using that sort of the adaptations that we've gotten from the first block, build you up, allow you to handle a little bit more peak intensity and sort of relative intensity. And what we mean by that is, we're going to start putting your reps up, going to make the back off work slightly more challenging, so that, you know, you're actually pushing and you actually feel like you are pushing, right? But I will say that don't worry too much, because the block isn't long, it's kept short for a reason. And we do have times, we do kind of try to wave the intensity and volume block to block, so that you can continue to build really, really good momentum going into what we call the sort of the split in the road or the branches, right? So the way that we're going to recommend that you run this program is ideally you would run block 1, block 2, and then you would run block 3A, and then you would run block 4. But for some of you, you know, and this could take like a period of, you know, 4 months, right? Because it's a 4-week blocks. But it's, if some of you have a competition coming up and you are looking to use this program to kind of peak yourself into a competition, instead of doing the 3A block, which is what we have termed as sort of like a APRE volume block, you can just go into the peak strength block. However, if you do want to stretch out the program and get the most value out of it, we do suggest running the APRE or the volume block first, right, prior to running the peak strength block, because it might actually give you, you know, a better baseline to build peak strength off of. But if you do feel like, okay, because you're pressed for a time or timeline or whatever, you can have the option of going straight into the 3B block, which is the peak strength block. All right. So that being said, what we're going to do in the in block 3A or the volume block is we're just going to use an APRE style sort of protocol, which is just you have each of the days where only on squats and bench, what we'll do is we'll give you some every week you'll be running AMRAPs, and based on how you perform on those AMRAPs, it will decide next week's loading. So again, we'll run you through a program, but that's roughly the gist of it. And what we're trying to do here is to allow you to, you know, hit some sick volume and rep, you know, PRs and PBs, and then use that to kind of give you really a good base in terms of feeling like you've got a lot of confidence to continue to push into the peak strength block. And then going into the peak strength block, obviously it's a block that, you know, is trying to just peak your strength. And what we're trying to do here is we want you to touch higher absolute intensities. So you might be looking at doing, you know, 90%, 95%, and then you will be also doing, you know, relatively heavy weight on the bar. But what we're going to do is drop the relative intensity back such that you don't accrue too much fatigue through the back of work, and that will allow you to kind of continue to have, you know, good training sessions week on week leading up to a test date or, you know, a competition should you have one planned. All right, so if you know, if you guys got any sort of issues or questions and stuff, feel free to contact us. But otherwise, I think it'll be good for us to just kind of show you guys the program and then maybe talk through how to use a spreadsheet, you know, little things that you should be careful of, and then obviously just overall just using the spreadsheet to track the data.
Yeah, great. Thanks, man. So I think a couple of things that I just kind of want to touch base on here right before we move on is we're using autoregulation and RPE as a tool. So if you're unfamiliar with any of that stuff, then please feel free to contact us, or we'll probably leave some links in this sheet just to kind of explain exactly what RPE is. Basically, we're trying to regulate where you are and putting the right load on the bar and lift it for the correct number of reps. So it's not a case of looking at a single in a program and thinking max out. We want to hold you to a certain kind of standard and a relative intensity range. The reason that we're using this so predominantly throughout this program is because of the nature and the times of how we've designed this. You know, we're introducing this to somebody potentially after a layoff, and then it's designed to kind of repeat with refreshed numbers and maxes each time that you run it. So the goal isn't necessarily to just lift as heavy as you possibly can all of the time. It's to put the right load on the bar and to lift it the right number of times, as Mike Shearer would say. So any questions on this, again, like JJ mentioned, please feel free to contact us. All our links are in this kind of instructions README page. We're going to jump into the intro block now. We'll maybe loosely talk through a couple of exercise selection decisions that we've made. One thing to note about this very first 4 weeks is JJ and I decided that it would be a really good idea to limit loading through, you know, specific variations that we've chosen, because they will really reinforce skill development and oftentimes the weaker positions in a barbell movement, whilst keeping the reps relatively low. So we're going to have more load on there than we were doing it for more reps, but the variation itself is often load limiting. So we'll jump into this intro block now. And JJ, we can talk them through kind of from week one, what we're trying to do, and also how the sheet works. I realize that I'm in control of the screen now, so just kind of, I will type in as you go, and we can go from there.
All right, cool. So looking at the spreadsheet, right? So you have your 4 weeks written out. So we have put both blocks 1 and 2 into the intro spreadsheet. So ideally, we would like you guys to run through, you know, the whole of the intro block, so to speak. So we don't want you to just jump onto the, like, run 4 weeks and then jump on. So we've put it into one sort of tab so that you can't miss it. All right. So the first things first, we're going to talk about, you know, the first, the things at the top. So obviously we've got the start date, which you can just sort of edit based on whenever you start. It's not super critical that, you know, you go and change it and stuff, as long as you know, what it's there for, and it's pretty self-explanatory. It's literally the start date of the week. All right, so you can go ahead and change that, and the rest of the values should change for the rest of the week. So it's just assuming it's just in +7, so you can start, you know, the same time, the same day every week. All right, cool. And then below that, we have the suggested rest day sort of split. So what we are suggesting you to do is we're going to do day 1 and 2 back to back. And then we're going to have a rest day. We're going to do day 3 and 4 back to back. And then we will have 2 rest days. So obviously this is a suggestion. And if you feel like you need to, you know, because of work, because of, you know, any sort of other commitments, you need to adjust this, feel free to go ahead. It's just that we have designed this with this sort of split in mind to try to keep things relatively close, relatively specific, yet try to spread out the kind of load we're handling throughout the week a little bit better. All right, cool. So then we're gonna move on to the training maxes. So if you have had a quite a bit of a time off, you probably don't know your training maxes as it pertains to who you are coming back to training. So in this first block, this column or this section of the spreadsheet is not the most critical bit. However, it will become relevant, especially in the APRE block, and it's slightly it's a minor thing, but it's still going to be important. All right, cool. So the sort of general layout of the spreadsheet is you have your program, and the only things that you will need to fill up is the actual load that you have used, as well as the RPE. So say on your first day back, say for example, if it was me and you know, I don't know where my strength is, I will kind of work out and say, you know, I've had a really, really long time off, and I just squatted, you know, I just squatted 100 at RPE 6, which is, you know, single at RPE 6. So I would just key in 100 kilos, and then I would just key in the RPE. All right. And then the spreadsheet itself will calculate the kind of back off weights that we want you to work at. All right. So say, for example, how the way we've done it is so that, say, for example, you on the first day back, you were like, okay, I think I'm feeling really good. I'm warming up really well. And then you say, for example, you overshot. Right. So instead of a single at 6, you accidentally went up, and then you did a single at, say, for example, at 8, for example. So what you need to do is just key it in accordingly, press enter. And what the spreadsheet does is it will calculate the back off accordingly for you. All right, so so basically in terms of spreadsheet use, this is what you will need to do. You will need to track the actual load that you've used on the bar, as well as the RPE that you have rated it at. All right, so the formula works pretty consistently. So Alex and I have kind of made sure of that. So say, for example, if you are if you're a bigger squatter, say if you squatted maybe like 220 for a single at 6 coming back, it will regulate the back off accordingly to that. So you don't really have to worry. Whereas if you're maybe a lighter weight lifter, you might have, you might squat like 70 kilos at 6, and it will regulate accordingly. So overall, it shouldn't be, the first week shouldn't be this like crazy sort of jumps. And in terms of, yeah, in terms of the spreadsheet, that's how it's going to be used. So say, for example, if we're talking about the bench press on day one, it's just an RPE. It's just singles at 5, 6, 7, followed by, you know, neutral grip dumbbells. And those have no formula. So you just put in the weight that you've used, and then, you know, put in the RPEs. And what it just does is basically, it gives you the maxes that you, you know, it gives you estimated maxes. So because this is a variation, it's not necessarily the most important in terms of the estimated 1 RM, but it's just, you know, that's what the spreadsheet does. All right, cool. Yeah, so that's how the spreadsheet works from a technical point of view. All you need to do is just key in the actual load and the last set RPE. Cool. Yeah, so Peach, do you want to go through anything else in terms of spreadsheet stuff, or do you want to just talk through the, you know, the kind of programs and any sort of adjustments that we want to make and stuff?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to cover, we'll finish off with this intro block now. And what we'll do is we'll just talk through exercise selection, and then we'll kind of scroll through down to the end of the block to kind of what people can expect whilst going through this. And then I think we'll probably need to jump in and explain on the volume arm again, when we get into the APRE stuff, how that's going to vary for people to use. So I guess the first step for us to explain is we want people to get back to some sort of skill practice, right? We want them doing the competition movements. If you want to get better at squat, bench, and deadlift, you're probably going to need to squat, bench, and deadlift. And especially after having some time off, or maybe you've just, you know, had training on the back burner for a little while, maybe you've just been less specific for a while, it's going to be important for us to get some amount of practice in to allow you to kind of get back to things. So JJ and I decided that we kind of want to spread out the volume across the week as much as we can. You guys are going to be probably quite sensitive to volume and just to training in general. So we've tried to get away with doing as little as possible whilst hopefully still being able to make progress. So a lot of the variations that we use are going to be self-limiting. You know, if you follow the tempo and you do the things that we want you to do, you're likely going to be load limited compared to normal, but it's also going to allow us for potentially slightly quicker skill adaptation because we're putting you in positions that are harder to maintain and things like that as we move forward. So in terms of exercise selection, I'll just run through it kind of quickly. So obviously we've kind of got your competition squat, bench, and deadlift throughout the training program here. And then where we've looked to extend tempos, or we've put people in slightly less advantageous positions. So for instance, the tempo bench press here, 5-3-0 denotes the first number being a 5 count eccentric, so 5 seconds on the way down, a 3-second pause on the chest, and then up. A neutral grip dumbbell press is just slightly friendlier on the shoulders and the pec fibers, generally speaking, and it's where we're going to have our palms facing each other. So you'd lie down flat on a bench press with your palms facing each other, coming down and pressing, and then a hamstring curl just for a little bit more lower body volume and a little bit of knee flexion work. Again, competition deadlift, if you want to get better at deadlifting, you're probably going to need to deadlift. And then we've basically got some accessory lower body volume here. These tempo leg presses are probably going to get you. They're pretty rough. So we're looking at a 3 count eccentric on the way down. So 1, 2, 3, and then as we extend 1, 2, 3 on the way up. So the whole idea here is lots of blood, lots of lactic acid in your legs. It's going to limit loading naturally, but it should give you a really good pump and it should hopefully make things like your knees and things where you've had a little bit of time off feel pretty good. We do have a little note in here, and that is if you pull sumo, we want you to do one accessory, and if you pull conventional, we want you to do another. However, if you're feeling really like good at this point and you kind of want to do both, then please feel free. That's not a huge issue. That's just something that JJ and I kind of wanted to denote and do separately there. Again, competition bench press with the same kind of MEV back off volume. So that's minimum effective volume. So we're basically trying to do as little as possible we can to kind of drive you in. And this week one in particular it's week one in an introductory block. So this is very much like minimal, really like easing you into things with this. We've also included some accessories where we just see people often like neglecting or often body parts that get particularly beaten up doing powerlifting. JJ and I wanted to make sure that we were kind of trying to keep people healthy throughout this whole process and making sure that we're moving well away from the competition movements. So you'll see some movements that you won't typically see in a powerlifting program, with also kind of the denotion of them being a little bit load limited and hopefully moving through good ranges of motion. So you really shouldn't be chasing load in this first week. You should be chasing getting a good pump, feeling like good contractions in your muscles and moving well. One thing to note here on the programming front is the intensity piece here for your dips. If you can do bodyweight dips, then great. And we want you to do bodyweight dips until you reach a 7. If you do have access to something like a machine assisted dip or something like that, should you need to use that, then we would encourage you to do so. We're probably aiming for like 10 to 15 reps here. So if 2 or 3 bodyweight reps are going to be really, really hard, then maybe start on a band assisted or a machine assisted dip and then progress into that. Lastly, we've got the day 4, which is going to be progressively more specific as we go through this block and turning into more and more of something that looks a lot more like a competition day for a powerlifter. So this is a specific practice technique, and lots of powerlifting coaches will have like a squat, bench, and deadlift type of day where a lifter will need to get used to doing a squat, bench, and deadlift all in one day, right? If you're going to be a competitive powerlifter or you're going to do a mock meet, most of the time you'll do all 3 lifts in sequence with one another. So it makes sense to practice that to a degree. Now in this introductory block, we are using tempos to load limit and to kind of make these a little bit harder in terms of per rep, but also in terms of absolute load on the bar should be less, right? So we're looking at less load on your back, but also more skill practice. So the first exercise here being a 4-2-0 tempo squat. So that's a 4 count on the way down, a 2-second pause under tension at the bottom, and then on your way up. So you can do a double at RPE 6, and then you do back off. So like we mentioned before, let's say I did 100 kilos here and I managed that at bang on the RPE 6, it will give me my back downs to practice here. All right. So that's just a little bit of, touching base there for you guys to do. And then we've got Romanian deadlift. So this is kind of like coming in as an accessory deadlift or like a 1.5 frequency where we're deadlifting once earlier in the week. And then we've kind of got this accessory hinge slot here. This is really important for us, for you to get in, for you to do. Again, don't chase load here, chase kind of that lengthened hamstring position and getting your hips further away from the front and center of the bar and moving from there. And then this will progress as we go through. So the first 4 weeks just kind of naturally progress. And then we get into the strength block here where some things change and progress. So JJ, if you want to jump through and just run through this, man, and then we can jump into the volume block afterwards, and we can talk to the guys about how they maybe need to use the sheet differently when we get into that volume APRE block.
All right, cool. So for the second block that we're doing, which is the strength block, we've just called it a strength at 7 block. So what we are trying to denote here is you'll see that instead of a 4x3 in terms of on the competition lifts, we're doing a 3x4. So at a relatively higher intensity as well. So you'll see on the first week, as compared to if you're comparing week 5 against week 4. So PG, if you just scroll slightly, so you'll see that it is a single at we've gone from a single at 6 at -10% to a single at 7 -10%. So ideally the sort of back of ranges should still be the same, but then what's happening is the relative intensity is going to go up slightly. All right, so you're going to do, instead of 4x3, you're going to do a 3x4 instead. All right. So I think that should probably check out pretty close.
Yeah, perfect.
We just make sure that we go in and look at the formulas and make sure everything is all right, which should be good. Yeah, so what's happening in this block is you'll see some slight changes in terms of just the exercises, right? So what we've done is we've moved from a tempo, a 5-3-0 tempo to a 3-2-0 tempo. At a little bit more specific intensity. So we've moved from doing just 3 singles at 5, 6, 7 to a single at 7, followed by a 3x3. So we're getting a little bit more practice through the tempo bench press, yet holding a sort of making it a variation that is hard enough where it's still going to limit a little bit of load as well. And it's still going to give you loads and loads of specific skill practice, right? You know, the saying, move slow, learn fast, that's what we're trying to achieve, you know, within this first 2 block. We're trying to get you to sort of regain your ability to regain your technical skill in terms of moving weight. All right, and we're still going to have, you know, we're still going to have some volume through the dumbbell bench press. But instead of that, so what we are suggesting is if you have a chest press machine or you have access to a chest press machine, you can also use that in terms just getting the, so that what that does is just gets the pecs and gets the shoulders and, you know, all the pressing muscles through a little bit more range of motion and a little bit less specific range of motion to give you a little bit more hypertrophy, a little bit more volume, and help you to, you know, be able to not think too much about, you know, holding on to, you know, the technique, but allow you to sort of just mash some weight. All right. And then in terms of day 1 accessories for the first, for the next block, we'll be doing some additional hinging. So we've taken your hamstring curl volume and then made that a sort of a dumbbell Romanian, followed by a little bit more back work, right? So what we've tried to do is I think we have sort of moved, added in slightly a little bit more back work into the program. So you're also going to do a chest supported row for sets of 12 at an RPE of 7. All right, so moving on to day 2, same kind of concept here with what we're doing is we're going to ramp up the peak intensity by going to a single at 7. And then we are also going to ramp up the back down relative intensity by going from a 4x3 to a 3x4. Okay. Cool. So in terms of accessory work, we've taken out what we think is going to be the hellish exercises, which is the 303 tempo leg press. So if you're doing it right, those should feel quite, you know, those should be, you know, there should be real work. It's just how I'm going to put it. It should be hard work, right? Or it should feel like hard work at least. And we've taken that out in favor of a little bit more unilateral training, right? And the reason we have done this is because as we begin to ramp intensity in terms of the main lifts, we don't want you guys to be smashing a lot of bilateral sort of lower body intensity as well. And you know, from where we are in terms of how we think about programming, we do like to put lifters in a little bit more unilateral stance, and that will allow 2 things. So number 1 would be obviously you are not going to dumbbell reverse lunge as much as you can do a tempo leg press, right? At least we would hope not. Like if any one of you, you know, does actually reverse lunge as much as you leg press, then you either need to leg press more or you please send us a video if you have a huge reverse lunge, right?
They must have glutes the size of like TV screens, man.
Yeah, I think your grip will give up first before you can reverse lunge your leg press. Yeah, so it will be 3x9 and it will be 9 reps on each leg. So the reason we've set 9 is just to make it simple, because if we say 10, you're gonna people might ask, you know, do I do 10 sets together or 10 sets each side? So if we say 9, it's probably a little bit more self-explanatory, and it probably gets you to be a little bit more tuned in as well, because it's not usual within, you know, strength programs where people are counting to 9. All right. So the same thing here is, instead of we've just made the Copenhagen or the short lever Copenhagen plank a little bit more universal now. So we would like everyone to do it, regardless of you're pulling sumo or conventional. And then we will have some sort of 45-degree hip extension movement. So this is just an ab pump exercise. So just get a pump. Again, same concept as the first block. We just want a lot of blood flow, just to keep the hips a little bit more quote unquote healthy. All right, and then we're just gonna finish with the day 2 with a half kneeling Pallof press. So just a little bit more core work in terms of side to side anti-rotational core work. All right, day 3 will be our primary bench day, So same kind of concept here. We, instead of doing so what we've done here is we have actually, what we're trying to do with the bench press is, because it is you get a little bit more practice, and because you also most people can handle a little bit more intensity on the bench press. What we've done is we've decided to ramp up peak intensity just across both the top set as well as the back off, right? So instead of doing a 3x4, we want the reps to be really, really, really clean on bench press, because this will people can just kind of blast through their bench press set. So we've made the back off small, but done doubles instead of triples, right? So this will be the only slight variation moving from the first block to the second block is the main bench day. All right. And then the rest of accessories for day 3 is going to just be, upper body kind of very specific not specific, but just going to be upper body, just accessory work and just bodybuilding work. So we have the dumbbell pullover, supine grip, lat pull down. And the reason for that is just we want to get that shoulder out of a pronated grip and just have that shoulder moving kind of in a different sort of plane of movement. And then it also keeps your shoulders a little bit healthy, just putting it in a different position. We have a low incline dumbbell press and a overhead rope extension, which is the same as the last block. So we have taken out the dips and swapped them out for a low incline dumbbell press. And then moving on to day 4 would be our this is when we start to get a little bit more specific with the movement. So what we've done, as we've spoken about, is we've moved from the tempo squats to a pause squats. We'll move from the tempo bench press to a long pause bench press, or a 2-count pause bench press. And then we've moved from the non-specific Romanian deadlifts to a little bit more self-limiting variation in terms of the pause competition deadlift. All right, so looking at the program, you probably, what's going to happen in this first week is you're just going to take some time to work up to in terms of squat, a double at 7, followed by 3 sets of back offs, back off doubles at -10%. So same thing, use the formula, just make sure that you're keying it in the right columns, and they should, give you projected weights. And then same with the 2-count pause bench press, single at 7, 4 doubles. And the thing that you should be a little bit more aware of moving into this block is that for some people, especially if they are really good at doing pause deadlifts, the intensity here might be a little bit closer to your main deadlift day. So it's just make sure that you aren't. We've just tried to make sure that, because some people can get really close in terms of their variation work, their pause deadlift variation work, we've tried to limit that by just doing 3 sets of 4 at ramping 5, 6, 7, so that you don't kill yourself on the first week. All right. And then in terms of a week-to-week progression, last thing, we have a foam roller, just dead bugs, just to get you a little bit more side to side or lateral. We call it lateral compression, in terms of opening up one side and closing off the other side. So it's just a little bit, again, a little bit more of a health movement, get your core to kind of fire before you leave the gym. All right. And then in terms of week-to-week progression, what you will see is what's going to happen in the second strength block is on, I think, if I'm not wrong, on the main days stay the same, and the overload comes just from ramping up the back down intensities, but the peak intensity will still stay the same in terms of it's still going to be a single at 7. The only difference is on day 4, I believe we have just put up the RP on some of the variations ever so slightly. So the deadlifts are going to move up half an RPE week to week. And then what you'll see is at the end of the block, we are going to work up to fours at 7.5, and then the last week will be just a little bit of a deload in preparation to move into the volume block or the peak strength block.
Sweet. So that is our kind of first 8 weeks covered. So we're going to go into presuming that you're going to kind of run it exactly how we want you to run it. So this is kind of where the fork in the road comes to a degree, or the branches, as JJ described them. So let's just say theoretically you had 12 weeks and you picked up this program and you wanted to kind of run it, but you only had 12 weeks. This is where you might go into this first intro block that we've designed. So 4 weeks, weeks 1 to 4, weeks 5 to 8, and then you jump straight to peak strength. However, if you had kind of 16 weeks, which is probably something we'd encourage a little bit more of, you jump into the volume block here, which is an APRE based approach. So we'll kind of chat through how to run it and the different things here. But basically the goal of the APRE or using an APRE based approach is effectively progressing load week to week, depending on how well you do in these plus sets that we have. So there have been lots of different ideas across strength training across the years about different ways to do this. And this is one of my personal favorite ways to do this. So the difference is in the spreadsheet here is we're going to want you to take your 1 AMRAP set on squat and bench press once a week to an RPE kind of 8.5, 9. And you're going to end up entering the number of reps. So let's just say if I track back for a second, the training max here is based off of what we end up doing in week 7. So we have some singles at 7 across all of the movements. So just to make this simple, I'm just going to type them all in at 200 on my squat and bench press, squat and deadlift, and then a single at an 8 here on bench press. Let's just say it's 120. So now when I go into this volume block here, I should have all of the load reference columns sorted. Maybe we don't have that right now. That's fine. We'll make sure that's sorted when we do it.
No, Pete, you got to put in the RPEs.
Oh, my bad. Right, let's do that. So RPE. It's a good job we're making this video, bro.
Yeah.
7, 7, 7. And then when I click through, it will come up. Yeah, perfect. Okay, here we go. So then this cell will generate this times 0.8. So then we have our 80%, right? So I'll do my 4 sets of 2 at the 80% load of my training max. And then I'm going to do my squat AMRAP. Now, depending on the number of reps we achieve, we're going to want to enter this. So let's just say that week I achieved 8 reps at an RPE of 9. It's going to give me my estimated 1 rep max. And that's also going to basically base the rule off of what you're going to progress next week. So we've basically kind of said, if you manage 2 or 3 reps and we want you to keep the load the same until the next week, if you manage 3 to 6 reps, then we want you to up the load by 2.5 kilos. And if you manage 6+ reps, then we want you to go up by 5 kilos. So if I managed 8 reps here and my load was 180, the next week, the actual load I'm going to use is going to be 185. Okay. So forget about the intensity and those sorts of things here. We're going to use the target load to be 185 and the actual load to be 185. And then I'll do the same AMRAP again and it will progress. So I'll get a new estimated 1 rep max. Let's just say I managed to mirror the performance with 5 extra kilos. I would then progress again to an additional 5 kilos on the following week and do the same thing. If I only managed 4 reps here, I would only then progress by 2.5 kilos on each of the weeks. Does that make sense? I feel like it does. So the whole idea here is even if somebody was going absolutely crazy on their AMRAPs, they're only going to be able to progress by 5 kilos a week. And that we should find that they're going to find that kind of ceiling at some point. One thing to note, if you achieve more than 12 reps, so I'm thinking this might happen if you're either just exceptional at reps or you're maybe a lighter weight lifter with maybe just a little bit less load on the bar here, maybe set to 80%, don't challenge you. Just enter 12 reps. So if you manage 15, just enter 12 because that's basically like the top end that our E1RM calculates, and the formulas can get a little bit funky if you end up going above that, which we'll probably leave in the coach's notes just above here. But just to let you know that. So then basically what we're going to look at doing here is this is going to just naturally progress across the block, and it's going to leave you with a fantastic base to go from. So let's just say I was nailing these AMRAP sets every week and I progressed 20 kilos. So with a training max of 225, I've gone up sorry, 15 kilos across the block. So I've got 180, 185, 190. And then I've gotten to 195 on this final week. So that basically can leave me just like absolutely flying, right? So this last week is going to be 195. If you're doing an AMRAP at 195 and your training max is 225, like we're going to be in a really strong position to, you know, to progress and to thrive really. And that will set you up really, really nicely, right? Because we're kind of floating around this 90% mark towards the end of a training block, and you're just getting lots and lots of practice in this kind of mid to high 80%. Now, obviously, that's going to be higher for somebody that does really, really well with these reps. And is able to progress across the training block. So if my 80% was significantly less, so if I just jump back and change this very quickly, just so people can see it, if my training maxes were a lot less than what we had entered before, then obviously you have the potential to climb 15 kilos across a training block, or 15% overall, which might mean that your first week you might end up AMRAPing your max or close to your max, even with you know, with having these lower maxes here. So it's definitely worth kind of noting that things can accelerate very quickly across this training block, and can get really, really exciting for some lifters pretty quickly. And there's nothing more exciting than making major progress across these training weeks, and then potentially going into a peak strength block where maybe you've taken 95% of your max for a number of reps before you start that, right? Because that's really going to give you a place to thrive from. It's also kind of getting away potentially a little bit from what might seem like monotonous weekly singles, to try and give, you know, the lifter something exciting to do. In terms of exercise selection here, nothing actually changes other than obviously the progression in intensity in terms of the loading that we're going to get through the competition movements. Outside of, I think we changed the squat to a 3-count eccentric tempo from a pause. Yeah. And the same with the 3-count eccentric tempo deadlift here. So this is just going to give a lifter a real chance to thrive and put a lot of energy into those AMRAP sets, as well as just continue to make progress. So we've run the numbers in a number of different situations, and we haven't run into any issues with this so far. As long as you're kind of floating between either staying the same, adding 2.5, or adding 5, in pretty much any situation, that tends to work out pretty well. The only situation where it can get a little bit strange is if you're not a particularly big bencher, and those 5-kilo jumps are massive, then you may want to think about either getting some micro plates and doing smaller jumps week to week, and maybe making that top jump 2.5 kilos, and then maybe the next one down being, you know, 1 kilo or 1.5 kilos if you have access to those micro plates. JJ, is there anything else you want to add to this volume APRE block that we're talking about here?
No, I think you've pretty much covered everything. Yeah, the only other thing I would say, this just came up, is that it's going to be, you're gonna see a little bit more like bigger discrepancies in terms of like your primary days versus your like secondary days. So in terms of the first 2 blocks, what we're seeing is that, you know, you might have a very good sort of pause deadlift secondary, you know, Romanian deadlift day, or a pause deadlift day. But then on this block, what we are actually trying to do is to have the days in which you are AMRAPing to be the days that are actually the, you know, the ones that are driving your progression week to week. So we're not trying to smash you too hard on the secondary days. So if we look at, you know, your secondary squat or your SBD days, they are not supposed to be, you know, really, really hard sessions. And as best as you can, if you kind of, you know, take yourself out of that mentality of going really hard on the secondary days, you should feel recovered coming into the AMRAP days on week to week. All right. So PJ, if you just scroll up slightly and see, I think what we have done is we might have changed the split. Oh no, we haven't. So I think
The split stayed the same, but we've changed basically where your competition practice comes from, right? So we've made your day 2 deadlift basically kind of very light and comfortable. We've allowed the competition bench press on day 3 to push, and then we've changed the day 4 bench press to a much lower intensity and load limiting variation for everyone pretty much. So with this, actually, this is something novel and new that we haven't done in the rest of the block, and that is a repeat set. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to work up to a set of 5 at an RPE of 6, and then you're going to take that same load and use it for the remainder of those 3 sets.
Yep. So those are the only sort of like mild differences coming into the 3A block, or the volume block, so to speak. Accessory works kind of stays the same. Everything is, we're trying not to change too many things and have the main days drive your progression within this block.
Sweet, man. So we'll jump into the peak strength block, and this is basically going to kind of be that if you come from kind of like a block periodization model, or you kind of looking at like that, we're looking to get you ready in 4 weeks for a competition. So this is probably the hardest training block that you've got. And there's going to be 2 pretty hard weeks in here. So JJ, man, take it away. Let it run through. I guess the first place to start is going to be the training maxes. Now, you don't really need to worry about this as much on this one, because we've got so many single practice. Now, obviously, you should start to get a pretty good guide as to where you're going to be at with some of these singles. And it's going to be important to kind of be cognizant and aware of what's going on with those singles, because we don't want to push excessively here when there's actually going to be quite a lot of back down work. Now, this is kind of like what we're coined as like a low fatigue kind of strength model, with lots or higher number of sets and lower number of reps to kind of give for very specific practice. So for instance, on the squat, you're going to practice in this day 1, week 1 here of this peak strength block, you're going to practice walking out a heavy squat 8 times and bracing and beginning your descent, right? So if you have a training partner or you have an opportunity to do so and you're preparing for a competition, you probably want to use your competition commands, and you probably want to have lots and lots of practice here in doing exactly that. Sorry, JJ, I'll let you roll with it, bro.
Yeah. So basically, I think what would be good to do with talking about this block is if we start from the end. So if you scroll all the way to the end on week 4, let's look at day 4. So the best way to think about this is on day 4 of week 4 of this block is when you would like to schedule your test day or your competition day, right? So the best way to actually do this is to kind of work backward from this day. All right, so if we just talk about week 4 first, what you will see is, if we have put some numbers in there, so it'll be a single at 7, single at 8, single at 9, and then with bench press, it will be a single at 7.5, 8.5, 9.5, and then with deadlift, it will be 7, 8, and 9. So this is assuming that you're just doing a mock meet, right? You are not going crazy at a meet. You're not trying to, win nationals or an international comp. Although if you do using this program, let us know, and it'll be nice to see. But what we're trying to have you do here is we're trying to give you new maxes to kind of really celebrate the 4 months of work that you've been doing, right? So feel free to show us, like tag us, mention us, or do all that kind of stuff, and it'd be good to see how everyone get along. But so if we work backwards from day 4, on day 3 we have a competition bench, and then we do have some sort of back of volume there in terms of it'll just be a single at 6. So the way that we have sort of thought about this is we're just thinking about the single at 6 as kind of like a last warm-up kind of weight. So for the comp, so if you think about what you're going to do on the mock meet day or the test day, the competition single at 6 will probably be a weight that you'll be doing as a last warm-up for that day. All right, and then working back to day 2, Day 2 would be, your competition deadlift day. And this is going to be really, really light work, like 4 doubles at a sort of at a percentage, right? So 70% is probably, it should reference the kind of your deadlift max at the end of either the intro at 7 week or the sort of volume block. So obviously if you have this kind of crazy, if you did a really, really big AMRAP set and your numbers project out really, really high, and you put it in the program, and then on your secondary day for this whole block, because it says 70%, 75%, 70%, it spits up these huge numbers. I think what would be good for everyone to do instead is to use your deadlift numbers from the first week of this block, instead of using like those huge projections on your competition deadlift. Obviously we don't AMRAP the deadlift, but you can still use like those numbers that you have gotten from previous blocks as your estimated 1RMs or your training maxes for this block. All right, so the secondary day, the sort of the deadlift day on day 2 across the block is all percentage based. So just do the numbers, write the RPEs in, and then you'll be able to see the sort of progression. So day 2 on week 4 is kind of like a taper, if you can call it that, where we just want a really, really light practice with the deadlift, right? We don't want any more fatigue at this point. We're trying to drop as much of that off as possible. Okay. And then day 1 is obviously single at 6 on your competition squat. So same idea here. It's kind of going to be the last warm up for the test day. All right. And then going into week 3, I think what we are trying to do here, if we scroll down to day 4. Yeah, there we go. So I think day 4 on week 3 and week 2 are actually similar. If we can kind of show both of those days.
Yes, sir.
Cool. Yep. So the only difference is there is a slight drop off in terms of week 3 in terms of the volume. So you are coming in, on the day 4 of week 3 or the SBD day with a few numbers that you can be using in terms of as your openers, and in terms of as your kind of as your openers for the competition day, so to speak. So what we have done across the week is, instead of doing like a single 8, a single 8, a single 8, and then just trying to build that up in terms of relative intensity, what we have done is we started the block, the SBD days, with triples at 8, if I'm not wrong.
You're correct, my man. Yeah.
And then we have gone to a double at 8, and then we've gone to a single at 8, which is the week 3. And the reason for doing this sort of progression is we don't want you. I think a lot of people look at single at 8 with a lot of lust and a lot of oh my god, there's going to be a big yeah like with a lot of expectation and with a lot of like anticipation, right? Because that's what we all want to do as powerlifters. We want to hit that big single, right? And instead of just leaving you guys to have free reign and hit those big singles, we want to kind of manage that slightly. So we started the block with triple at 8, and then we've sort of taken 1 rep off the top set. And what that allows you to do is, kind of control how much weight you can put on the bar, because a triple at 8 is not going to be as heavy as a single at 8, and then slowly kind of taper you off, and whilst holding on to a little bit more of that back down volume. All right. So the only time we're dropping off that volume is in week 3. So you can kind of think of that week as a start of the taper, but also where the intensity is the highest as well. So that's kind of like the general breakdown of the block. I think overall the rest of the other days in this block serve as kind of like volume days. So if we just kind of scroll up a little bit, you will see that on days 1 and days, on day 1 and day 3, you can see that the volume kind of stays the same in terms of variation lifts, but then you can see that on week 1 and week 2, we have a 4x5 on a competition bench. So that just acts as a little bit of specific volume to drive a little bit more adaptation going into your SBD days, which are your main days. So similarly for the squat as well, we have a 7x2 on day 1 for weeks 1 and 2, and then I think on week 3 it drops to a 5x2 or a 4x2 on week 3.
Yeah, so this is kind of traditionally known as like a step taper, where you're progressively kind of taking out some volume. The thing that was important for JJ and I was to maintain kind of like a weekly structure, because we're going to get to a point where we're getting pretty predictable performances from these RPE singles and things like that. And we want to make sure that we're kind of maintaining most of that whilst just kind of washing away a little bit of fatigue. That's kind of the goal. We'd rather have our fitness at its highest possible point whilst carrying a little bit of fatigue, rather than be over recovered and under practiced.
Yep.
Perfect.
Cool. So did we leave anything out?
I think we've got everything, man. The only thing to probably mention is rock back breathing might be new to some people.
Okay, cool.
So we might want to, maybe we'll just mention why we've done that and kind of the idea of that there, man. Much like you did with the foam roller dead bug that you mentioned.
Oh, okay, cool. So with the rock back breathing, I think one of the things that we are trying to be really careful about, or in terms of just, something different that's not being done, is to help powerlifters kind of manage their recovery a little bit better. So we put in rock back breathing in terms of at the end of SBD days, just as a sort of a cool down or as a decompression, if you can call it that. And basically what rock back breathing is, we want to introduce a little bit more flexion into more systemic flexion into the whole system, right? Because these are hard training days, and what's going to happen is you are going to be really, squeezing all your muscles, compressing all the muscles. You're going to be, maybe even extending a lot. So we want to make sure that you can actually get yourself to the test day, right? There's no point training so hard and then not making it to the test because you actually can't recover, or you get a little beat up and stuff. So what we're trying to do here is, with rock back breathing, is get you out of that extension position, get you to actually get a little bit of air into your back, into your upper back, into your mid back and lower back, as well as get that pelvis out of an extended position into a little bit more tucked position. So we kind of think of it as a bit of a cool down and a little bit more of a restorative drill, so that you can actually go ahead and not be so beat up during this peak. So it's just something slightly different, and something that we wanted to give you as a little bit of a value add. So we don't want you to just be thinking, how can we drive performance, right? Performance comes through obviously good training as well as improve recovery, and we want to kickstart that recovery as soon as possible. And once you've done your last deadlift, go and hit some rock back breathing, just chill. And I think that's what the prescribe it is, like 3 sets at chill AF or something like that. And then yep. So we're just breathing, right? It's just learning to calm down. If you've taken loads and loads of like pre and you're stimmed up for these sessions, I think just a little bit of breathing will help you to regulate that. So that, getting to the meet, you don't feel absolutely destroyed by the program.
Perfect. I think that's everything. One thing that we have mentioned is a little bit of movement prep and warm-ups we'll jump into in a second. But one thing we are kind of really encouraging you guys to do is, if you do use this program, you do enjoy it, etc., or you do have any questions that we haven't answered across this video, then please feel free to reach out. Our details are all on this kind of instructions readme page here. And if you do feel like you want to give back to us, or you want to donate us some money, then there's our PayPal link for it on here as well. One thing that's really, really important for JJ and I is to kind of give back. And I think that's one thing that I wanted to do this once JJ was on board, was to do this and to help people out. If you still don't have access to any kit, and you're kind of looking to try and be potentially like the best powerlifter you can be without any kit, then there is JJ's program, which I'll link in the comment section below here. It's just be uploaded on YouTube. You know, and if you are really struggling with exercise alternatives or movements that you can't do, and we haven't covered them in this video, then like I said, please feel free to reach out. So the last little bit, the last little kind of value add that we wanted to mention is on this movement preps and warm up. So this is just something we've thrown together and will probably be adjusted slightly actually after this video, because we kind of want to put in our own links and we want to add some extra stuff to this. But this is going to kind of be where potentially some of our services might shine a little bit more, and we're kind of putting you in a position to do really, really well and feel really, really good whilst you lift, and hopefully be priming you for better positions and things like that when we are under the barbell or doing sets and reps in the gym. So in here, I don't want to talk too specifically because, like I said, we're probably going to be changing this or editing it a little bit. But basically, when you come onto this page, there'll be lots of YouTube links that are all kind of highlighted that will run you through these different things. Where you see something like a 3x5, that's going to be 3 sets of 5 breaths typically, or 5 cycles. And then if you just see kind of like times 20, like for instance here on the foam roller hemi bridge, that's going to be 20 reps in total. So JJ, is there anything that you kind of want to run through here, or anything specifically that you find particularly beneficial, or kind of cues that you want to run people through, or what the idea behind this whole thing is?
Yeah, so I think one of the reasons why we have put this movement prep or this kind of warm-up sheet separately is we don't want you to be overthinking your warm-ups and your movements and all that kind of stuff, right? So one of the reasons why I put it separately is so that hopefully if you look at it and you're like, actually, I don't really need any of this, it's fine to kind of forget about it, right? If you're already moving really well and all that kind of stuff, it's not going to be, you know, it's not going to think that's going to make you improve as a lifter. Like it might be that, you know, 1 or 2% kind of things, and if you want to go ahead and do it, like do it. But I think one of the things that I do want to caution people is not to become overly neurotic or spend too much time on it. We should be looking to get the into training, right? That's the important bit. All right, cool. So in terms of all of these things that we have just kind of programmed, I would say that if you already have a warm-up routine or a prep routine that you are really, really comfortable with, there isn't a big reason to go and chop and change that. We want you at the end of the day to feel the best that you feel, and to be able to do the program, right? So just because we have put this in, it doesn't mean that you need to, you know, run it exactly as we have written it. So feel free to just have a look, click through the links, and then, you know, see if those things help you. But in terms of just to describe the movements to you, what we're trying to do here is to get you a little bit more integration in terms of, you know, your internal obliques, your transverse abs, your hamstrings, and especially your, you know, your lower glute fibers, in terms of just training the lower body, such as squats and deadlifts. So what we're looking at here is we're gonna look at a lot of drills that teach you how to stack. And what I mean by that is we're looking to get, you know, the top of your head sort of in line with the bottom of your pelvic floor, with your sort of rib cage and your hips all in that right position, as well as to find your heels, right? So these are all kind of what I call sagittal competencies. And what they'll help you to do is just help you to actually hold your position a little bit better when you go to train, or have a good reference of how things should feel when you go to train. Obviously, it's not going to be the same for different people of different morphologies. So some people can, like, you know, when you start putting a barbell on your back, it's not the same thing as a 90-90 hip lift, right? It's going to drive a little bit of extension and stuff, but at least we want to give you that reference. So, you know, feel free to use this tab if you don't already have a warm up or a movement prep kind of routine that you are comfortable with. Otherwise, you feel free to do the ones that you know have already, you know, spend some time building up and being really comfortable with. All right, and then the last thing is just for bench press. What we're trying to do in terms of bench press is obviously you know, just to get your shoulders moving a little bit more, and how we are aiming to do that is through a lot of rotation of the rib cage and just moving your your shoulder blades on the rib cage, such as through things like band pull apart, or even just learning how to extend your thoracic spine through things like the T-spine stretch. So all of these things, again, we don't want to be overdo them. We just want to do enough so that we're good enough to go. So the only other thing that I want to add is that feel free to, if you squat it and then you need to go into your bench press and you feel a little bit stiff in the shoulders and stuff, feel free to just run through the bench press sort of movement prep right after you squat, so you don't have to do it all at the start. This is why it's kind of broken up into before squats, before deadlifts, and then before bench press.
Nice. I think that's everything, man. So yeah, like I said, if you have any questions, then please feel free to reach out to us. Hopefully we've covered everything. Hopefully there's a good explanation of each block, what's going on, etc. And we've given you guys enough movement alternatives, or just movements generally, to kind of tick those boxes. Again, if you want to feel free to reach out to contact us. Our Instagram handles are all on this instruction README page, as well as our website, and you can sign up for coaching from there, or take any movements that you want to from there on in. Thanks very much if you made it to this point. You can follow me at Peach Squats, you can follow JJ at lift_ng, and you can follow Battalion Barbell at Battalion Barbell, and you can reach us through the website that's linked here and below. Yeah, happy lifting, stay strong, enjoy yourself. Hopefully you can make some big gains, and if you do and you want to tag us, then please do. I'm sure JJ and I will both be hyped if we see some big rep PRs or some big new PRs or PBs across this training block. You want to leave them with anything, mate?
Nope, I think that's it. Just I hope people enjoy the program. Like, I think that's really the most important thing.